This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. It's really easy to focus on your problems and assume that nobody else has your problems. And this is especially true in football. Football fans spend weeks, sometimes days, worrying about their team's problems. It can go the other direction where we're so wrapped up into what our team can do well that you don't really think about what other teams do well, and you kind of get wrapped up into this kind of singular mindset. But every team has problems, is basically what I'm trying to say. And that's especially true in the AFC North. Not only does every team have problems in the AFC North, every team has weird inconsistencies, right? And Browns fans coming off the bye might feel like we're the only one in the division going through anything at all, and that we're the only one that's going to have uncertainty, when the truth is that all four AFC North teams have been, in some ways, disappointing, and in other ways, horribly disappointing, and have problems. Real big problems. Not a single team in AFC North does not have a big problem. So when I point out a problem for the Browns, I don't think that means that the season is over, because every team in this division and every team in the NFL and a lot of teams in the playoff race have problems. It's about if you can fix them in time to be able to get into the playoffs. So we know what the Browns' problems are. We have no idea what this passing offense is going to be after after Deshaun Watson maybe gets back this week. Maybe he doesn't. We just don't know. We haven't seen enough. We're still questioning it. It hasn't been super encouraging, but it hasn't been entirely discouraging either. We're just in limbo with that when it comes to Deshaun. And this passing offense, we don't know. Have no clue. Don't even know if he's going to play this week versus San Francisco. I don't know. It's a huge question mark. Browns have huge question marks there. Run game is a huge question mark. Offensive line's a little bit of a question mark. And the wide receivers are a little bit of a question mark. So right now you can say that the Browns offense is a bit of a problem for them. They haven't found the consistency that they need on offense. They haven't found the consistency that they need at the quarterback position. They haven't found the success they've wanted from a scheme standpoint. So that's where the Browns' problems are. Defensively, they're a very good team. Special teams, they're fine. Now let's talk about the other team's problems, right? Because we've been so wrapped up into that it feels like it's the only thing happening in your world if you're a Browns fan. But that's just not true, because you look at Pittsburgh and you can make the argument that they have the worst version of the Browns' problems. They just happen to have won more games at this point, right? The Steelers' issue is that their offense is awful. The Steelers' issue right now is that their offense is not good. It's awful. It's pretty bad. And their defense is good. But you see the problem, right? The offense is awful. The defense is just good. You know, there's a bit of a concern there. Now, where Pittsburgh has been extraordinarily lucky or fortunate in is these fumbles, right? They force the fumbles, and that's one thing, but like the fumble recovery luck that they have is incredible, and they're able to get on top of that. They're able to get these turnovers. There's always a question when you see these defenses in the NFL very early in the season that are thriving off turnovers. There's always the question of what happens once the faucet turns off. And we've seen it the couple of games where Pittsburgh has played a team that hasn't turned the turnover faucet up to max, right? You can count two games, the Texans, the 49ers, and yes, the Texans and the 49ers. Those are the two teams that Pittsburgh has played that they haven't turned over the ball a million times in those games. And you see the defense looked a lot worse than they do normally when they play these teams that are turnover heavy. Right now, the Ravens are a very turnover heavy team. I believe they're in the top 5 of turnovers. The Cleveland Browns are probably top of the league in turnovers right now. And that's how Pittsburgh has kind of snuck their way back into this conversation. So that's Pittsburgh's problem. Their defense is just okay. Well, they're not just okay. They're just good. I don't think they can stand up if you don't turn the ball over against them. And to their credit, they do a good job of being aggressive, but eventually that adjustment gets made when you're playing other teams. And then the ball's going to be on this offense. And this offense for the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's a concern if you watch them. They had the one play to George Pickens where the Ravens decided to leave him one-on-one with a Marlon Humphrey who's coming back from injury. Not the greatest decision in the world there. I think a super aggressive move when you just don't have to be that aggressive when you're playing a Kenny Pickett. But when they play him straight up, he can't really do anything. That offense is anemic. They can't get first downs. They're not fun to watch. They're not interested. They only have Jaylen Warren can break a play every once in a while, maybe George Pickens, but if you do something about those two, there's not really much else that Steelers offense can do. And it's so bad that the Steelers home crowd is booing the Steelers offense every time they go out there and chanting "Fire Matt Canada." So again, this is not me inventing these problems for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is where it's at. Some people might want Kevin fired, and maybe if Kevin has a horrible game this week versus San Francisco, people might chant "fire Kevin." But at the end of the day, that's already where Pittsburgh is right now. They've been there for 2 weeks. They were chanting "fire Canada" 2 weeks ago. So think about that one. That's where Pittsburgh's at. Browns have similar issues. Offense inconsistent. Defense really, really good. Browns defense, I think, has looked better than Pittsburgh's throughout the first 4 weeks of the season, or the first quarter of the season. I would say that the Browns offense has had moments where they've looked much better, right? Deshaun Watson or Kenny Pickett, who do you want to take the bet on? I think most people take the bet on Deshaun Watson. We're just sticking strictly to football here, right? So that's Pittsburgh's problem. Not a great place for Pittsburgh to be in, but they get turnovers. They find a way. At the end of the day, Tomlin's competent. He finds a way to win games. So shout out to them. Let's talk about Cincinnati's problems. Defense inconsistent. I know you guys thought I was going to start with Joe Burrow, but Joe Burrow's going to correct himself eventually. We know Joe Burrow's really good. He's not going to fall off a cliff in his 4th year as a pro or whatever it is. He's really good. We know he's really good. He gonna be back to good as long as he doesn't re-aggravate that calf injury and get hurt. We know that week 17, Joe Burrow gonna be Joe Burrow, right? There's no reason to believe that that's not gonna be the case. That man's gonna be that man. He's really good. Now, I'm not concerned about Joe Burrow. I'm not concerned about Jamar Chase. They're going to figure that out eventually, and they might have figured it out already with what they did against the Arizona Cardinals. All that's just fun fluff that you could throw at it, be like, oh, should they be concerned about? No, Joe Burrow's fine. That defense for Cincinnati, though, I don't think a lot of people understood or watched enough Cincinnati Bengals football to understand what the dynamic of that team is. A lot of people see Joe Burrow, they see Jamar Chase, they see T. Higgins, they see Tyler Boyd, and they go, oh, this is a run and gun, shoot them out, win by scoring a bunch of points type of team. But that's not who the Cincinnati Bengals are. If you've been watching the Cincinnati Bengals, you would know that this is a team that can score at any moment on offense, but does not score very often on offense. And what I mean by that is that their score percentage per drive is not the highest in the league. It's not even close to what you would expect. They have a lot more 3-and-outs than you would expect for an offense as high powered as them. And that they're very inconsistent in between drives, right? They'll have 2 great drives where they look like the best offense on earth. And then they'll have 4 drives where they look like they just can't get anything together. That's what the Cincinnati Bengals offense has always been. Because I think a lot of it has to do with Zach Taylor and how he kind of calls things. He doesn't have enough protection in there, lets Joe Burrow get hit. You take a sack or you get a penalty on an offensive drive, it kills them. Like, I think the stat is 91% of the time, that drive will result in failure. Once you get an offside, once you get a penalty, a holding penalty, or a sack, it's like 91% of drives with those don't work out. Or 9% of drives like score touchdowns in that. Something along those lines. So, So the Bengals have a defense problem. The defense problem is that for years, this Cincinnati defense has been good enough to carry the Bengals offense through those inconsistencies. It really didn't matter that the Bengals would have these like stretches of a couple games or 6 or 7 drives where they just wouldn't be successful because their defense was always really, really good. They've had a top 10 defense these last 2 years that they've been to the AFC Championship game. That defense is one of the bigger, more important parts to the Bengals' success the last 2 years, more so than anything. You look at a lot of the highlights of the Cincinnati Bengals playoff runs over the last few years, you'll notice the defense keeps popping up more than people assume. That Cincinnati defense was really the thing that took them from a average to better than average team to a Super Bowl championship contender team. The defense does not look like it's at the same level that it once was. That is a concern. Can the Bengals be that conference championship repeater, that division title repeater? Can they be the same quality of team? They're going to win 10 games. I have no doubt. I don't care what the record is now. They're going to win 10 games. Joe Burrow, all that guy, they're too good to not win 10 games. But the question is, can they win 11, 12? Can they get to the second round of the playoffs, third round? Can they get back to the Super Bowl if their defense is not as good as it once was? And I don't think they can. They have problems. They're a lot more vulnerable this year than they've ever been. And then we move to the Baltimore Ravens. And they have problems. One, that run defense that they paid all that money for when it came from Roquan Smith, right? Roquan Smith's brought in there to really anchor that run defense. It ain't as good as they want it to be. Roquan Smith, I think there's a good question on this if he's as good as everybody says, because I fail to see the dominant impact on the game that he has in any aspect. He's a good player. He's a pretty damn good player. I'm not saying he's not, but is he a Quincy Williams, CJ Mosley good player, or is he a Fred Warner good player? Because I watch Fred Warner, I see his domination in the game every game he plays in. I watch Roquan, and it's kind of like watching Quincy Williams. It's kind of like watching CJ Mosley. Good player, but maybe not what he's hyped up to be. Maybe he shouldn't be one of the highest paid players on your defense at the linebacker position. I don't know. So the defense is not what they want it to be. It's still decent, like pretty good to decent. And they'll be able to win games off the strength of that. And I think Lamar Jackson looks better than he's ever have. But what's the problem with the Baltimore Ravens? It's the same problem it's been for years. Wide receiver. I told Raven fans in the offseason, just because it's better than the worst in the league does not mean you have upgraded to the top half of the league. Got to be cautious. Like, teams get carried away. Sometimes fans get carried away. When their team upgrades a terrible position that makes it they hype that up to, oh, we got the greatest wide receiver room. Like this, the thing that blew my mind was the fact that people were touting this thing and choosing this language, although true, to tout this wide receiver room. It's the best wide receiver room that Lamar Jackson's ever had in the NFL. And that's technically true. But don't forget, we're talking about a second-year player in Rashad Bateman, who's not looked like he's panning out at all. You're talking about Nelson Aguilar. You're talking about Odell Beckham, right? Like coming off of a knee injury after missing a whole year. You're talking about Odell Beckham. And then a rookie in Zay Flowers. And Zay Flowers been solid. But that's who we're talking about. It ain't enough. Also, what people didn't factor in was like they were using the Greg Roman like depth chart to talk about how deep this wide receiver room is. But you ain't got Greg Roman no more. You got Todd Monken. You're going to have 5 wide out there. You're going to have 4 wide out there. So now you ain't even as deep as you used to be. You're just the same level of dookie depth that you've always been at wide receiver, and you're starting to see it pop up. How many drop passes did Lamar Jackson have? Lamar's ready to take a step as a pocket passer, but he can't find nobody to catch the ball. Odell Beckham's not getting separation anymore. Rashad Bateman can't catch the ball, and when he does get separation, he can't find the ball, and sometimes he don't even get the separation, so I don't know what you do with that. Zay Flowers is a good piece, but he's going to be limited by his size on how good he can be, right? He's not going to be like Cooper Kupp. Like, you're just not going to get that. You're going to get a really good player out of him, but you're not going to get that number 1 type receiver that they've been desperately wanting over there. We know what Nelson Aguilar is. We know what Devin Duvernay is. We know what they are. It's the same problem. They're limited by passing because their wide receivers just aren't good. Mark Andrews, sometimes he looks like he's back to being Mark Andrews. Sometimes he disappears. Offensive line, it can use work for the Baltimore Ravens. Not the greatest offensive line in the NFL. They have problems, and they're horribly inconsistent. One week, they look like world beaters against Cleveland's defense. The next week, they can't beat Kenny Pickett. One week, they look dominant. The next week, they lose to Gardner Minshew. They're a horribly inconsistent team on both sides of the ball. You don't know what you're getting out of them. Offensively, it's a mixed bag. Lamar looks as good as he's ever been, but those wide receivers look about the same as Lamar's been dealing with his whole career. It is what it is. So why talk about the whole AFC North? Why bring this up? It's because I want you to know that this whole division has problems. Everybody's around 500 or slightly below 500. The Browns are 2-2. The Bengals are what? 1-3? No, 2-3. My bad. 2-3. The Baltimore Ravens are 2-3. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are 3-2. Everybody got problems. So when we're focusing on the Browns' problems because we talk about the Browns here the most, understand we ain't the only team with problems. We ain't the only team in our division with problems. And that just because you have problems, that don't mean that you throw the season out or do anything like that. Browns had their problems for sure, but so does Pittsburgh, so does Baltimore, so does Cincinnati. It's a race to see who fixes their problems first, because these are all good enough teams that if they fix some of these problems, they can make them run. We'll see what happens. The rest of the season is going to happen. It's long. We got a long season, long October, long November, long December. Strap in. Strap in. A lot of y'all want this to be easy, but it's Browns. Y'all know it ain't going to be easy. It's going to be sweaty palms time. It's going to be clench butt cheek season. You know what it is. Get ready to be nervous all year. It is what it is. This is what being a Browns fan or a football fan in general is about. So that's the AFC North picture. Everybody has problems. Ain't just us. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.